Good morning, Vikings fans.
Good morning, Vikings fans.
Woo! Now Joe's responsible for the bleeding ears. We take feedback seriously. Yeah, what a beautiful day. At least yesterday was.
Best place to be in Minnesota on days like that.
You know, you get maybe a handful of these a year, so it's
That's generous, Joe. A handful.
Yeah.
This is Minnesota now. You got to take the ones you get and get out there. I came home yesterday and said anybody who has not gone out and seen this day, it was like 71 and that light breeze and the warming sun and all the colors. It's incredible. Plus, there was a Vikings win last week, so there you go.
Yeah, it's a weird situation. You know, I don't know how to feel about this team yet. You know, I hate to look like at the, you know, we've been doing this show for like a month, but for those of you that don't know, Joe and I also do a podcast called the Purple Journal Podcast, and we've been doing that for a couple years now, and we actually started on a different podcast together that shall never be named or referenced ever again. And
Vikings Journal.
Yeah, rest in peace. And I look at old shows, like the titles of them when I'm looking at statistics, and I see a lot of, like, especially last season, after Dalvin Cook got injured, which was only like a week and a half after Bradford went down. I don't want the titles to look like super over-exaggerations that are like the end is near, which was one of the titles of the show during like week 4, week 5 last year. And so, you know, I don't want to be, I guess I don't know how to feel, because I feel like we're in a similar situation where we were last year when we were 2-2, and then, you know, won basically every game except for one after that. And I feel like, that having been said, that this Jets game is incredibly important for that, to really show the people what kind of team this Vikings team is. I felt a lot better before the Broncos game last night. Seeing them and Case Keenum just light up the Cardinals. And the Vikings, you know, won easily. They had a comfortable lead against the Cardinals, but, you know, the first half was garbage. So, yeah, how do you feel about this team? Do you think that, I saw someone on the Viking Age who's a respected writer say that this was a not must win, but I forget the word he used, like something similar to a must win, like go all in, or basically must not lose. How do you feel about this team, about this game?
Well, Joe, first of all, I feel about it differently than you, because I don't feel about a team. It comes from having watched this team for 50 years, you know, and I just have a different outlook on it. I feel about this team game by game. I mean, I don't need to have an overarching feeling about them, because, you know, in the NFL, it is week to week. It's week to week. You know, you win, you lose, and there's 16 games. Everyone's important. Every win is important. It doesn't matter who it comes by, and it doesn't matter how you get it, because you're never measured by the amount of points you beat a team by. You're measured by win or loss, and stats. They say didn't build Belichick, so stats are for losers, and then to a certain extent, that's true. It is. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter that the Vikings were the best defense in the league last year. Look what happened in the NFC Championship. That's what matters. And this team is never going to, under Zimmer, is never going to hammer a team like you saw the Cardinals get hammered last night. You know, the Cardinals might have just finally given in. I mean, people were saying about them last week. Coming into this Thursday night game, they haven't given up yet, you know, and Larry Fitzgerald is still trying to whoop them up and say, you know, I mean, they got David Johnson, they got, you know, young players, you know, they got some good, I think they got either one of their lines is good, you know, either defense or offense, and they have a lot to build on. And, you know, week to week, if your team is ready to play and still gives a crap, they're gonna they're going to play it and they're going to win, or they're going to throw throw a pick six like they started the game last night against the Broncos, and that's just so demoralizing. You saw
32 points they got me on defense.
Yes, that's what you saw happen to the Vikings last year in the NFC title game. It's I don't you cannot measure 45-6 or whatever they got beat last night next to how the Vikings played them. The Vikings played
different situation.
The Vikings played very well against them on every phase of the game, and they beat them. They beat them by 10 points, and that's fine. I don't have any measure. I don't care if they're not blowing teams out. I just want them to win. In fact, I like, since I watch all the games, I like them to be exciting. It's comforting to see, them throttle somebody they should. It's disturbing to see them get throttled like they did against the Bills. That one I would be concerned about. But, they just need to go up to New York and MetLife Stadium and get a win this week. I mean, this is a pretty dang good Jets team. And, while the Vikings should on paper win, there's no way that that's guaranteed. So I don't have this overarching feeling, but how do I feel about this team? I think they have a decent defense that's starting to play better. I think they have a great offense that's, if they could get Dalvin Cook back on the field and get the offensive line really working together, they can put up points. And the special teams has pulled their head out of their tailpipe, and they're starting to play better. So, I mean, they're on the rise. Look what happened last year. You mentioned it. They were 2-2, and then they just reeled off these teams. I mean, did you have an identity that you were concerned about, last year? No, you just enjoy them winning games week after week. But,
yeah, and I mean, it's hard for me. Last year was different just because the X factor at the quarterback position was really surprising. I kept waiting for the bottom to drop out, and it seemingly didn't until the NFC Championship game. And so, it's, obviously I'm a little bit more of an emotional guy. I buy into a lot of those narratives. I want to know what kind of team I should, on a personal level, what my expectations should be. But also,
is that let me address that. That's the concern right there? Is it, what your expectations to be? I don't have any expectations. I want them to win every week. I take it, a week at a time and say, well, they should win or they should lose, and hopefully they will. But in this league, you can never expect anything. Yeah. Crazy stuff happens. You've seen it.
I think the coach of the Jets said something similar. I had the quote pulled up earlier about the Vikings being, one game away from the Super Bowl. He said basically the same thing. It's a different season. It's just a different set of circumstances. But, I mean, all signs, and we'll get into the Friday's 5 Furious Facts in a second, but all signs do point to this team turning things around. We've discussed this. I think that, remove that Bills game, and I think a lot of people would feel differently about this Vikings game, even if they still lost to the Packers. They hung in there with the Rams, and the Rams are on fire. The defense had some pretty gaudy stats against Arizona, despite the final score. I think Cardinals were 0 for 10 on third downs, 0 for 2 on fourth downs. The Vikings are doing really well in that regard, third down stuff. So that's exciting. I did, before we get into the 5 Furious Facts, I did want to quickly touch on Mike Hughes, who unfortunately, went down with an ACL. Was it an MCL also?
Was it? I had not heard that.
I had heard that somewhere, and I'm not sure. We talked about this on Purple Journal, or Luke Braun brought this up, that some people think that maybe Hughes got injured, I think, before halftime, and then tried to tough it out, and then either injured himself more, or...
He did, but I don't know if it was necessarily his ACL or MCL that was injured. He got injured when he got injured, I think, but...
Yeah,
there was reports of that he got hurt first and then stayed out there, and they wouldn't have put him out there if he's not I mean, is that? I mean, what's the point of that anyway? Is it a conspiracy against the failure of the Vikings training staff?
Which is like just won a reward, an award for being like the best in the league,
Right.
and they had halftime to look at it. I don't think that makes very much sense. I'll look into that a little bit more, but it is really unfortunate. You know, it's the second season in a row that the Vikings' top draft pick went down with an ACL at home. You know, luckily, you know, despite all of my anger about how the draft ended up going, which is actually looking, I mean, the injury notwithstanding, a lot better as time goes on with Brian O'Neill, which we'll touch on as well. But, yeah, I mean, the Vikings have depth at the position. I wanted to see what you thought how this might change things on defense. Obviously, the Mackenzie Alexander was splitting snaps with Hughes at the slot position. You have Curse, who's probably the biggest slot corner in the league, or the history of the Vikings at least, at 6'4". You have Holton Hill, who hasn't played much, but you know, he's an undrafted guy who would have been drafted higher if not for some personal issues. So, you know, he's a big guy too. I think he's like 6'1" or 6'2". Which would put, between him and Curse, you'd have Rhodes is over 6 feet, Trey Waynes is over. You'd have a lot of big guys, which is actually, I don't want to say addition by subtraction, but the way Luke was talking about Curse especially made me feel like, wow, this could actually maybe be a little bit better for the team. Like, how do you feel about the injury? Have you know, obviously you get to go over to TCO. Has Hughes been around for interviews, or is he just hiding out waiting for surgery?
I saw him limping on or crutch into the locker room on Wednesday and went to his locker, and he was chatting with another player. And he did not talk. He had a smile on his face, which was nice. I remember last year seeing Dalvin Cook in the locker room the week after his ACL tear. And, you know, you want to look at these guys and you think, oh my God, they should be walking around just devastated, you know, because their season's over and they're just, you know, and it was nice in both cases to see their demeanor was not total devastation, that they're going to take it head on and they're going to go, you know, get their health back and get back next year. You know, it's I'm sure it's such a part of this business that's what they tell them, and say, okay, this is what your job is now, is to get healthy and get back here. You know, because I was bummed because he's a good kid. He's smart because he's picked up. You know, you heard all along how quickly he picked up the defense.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just talk, because Zimmer put him in there from day one and had him playing, and he made plays. So it's like, it's a tough loss for the team.
Didn't Zimmer say something to expound on what you said about picking things up, that he dialed it back a little bit, but he said he was like the fastest to ever pick up his system or something like that?
He did, and then as soon as everybody, you know, all of us scribes picked up on that and started running with it, he said, you know, you better dial that back. You won't get these rookies' heads too swell. He didn't say that, but he basically, you know, didn't want to overpraise the guy, but you know, he still got some things to learn in that, you know. But no, the truth is, he did. He picked it up, and he therefore got to play, which is, you didn't exactly see that with Waynes when he came in. So,
big time.
I mean, you know, don't pay as much attention to what they say as what they do, and they put him in there. So it's a huge loss, and I think you nailed it earlier, though, that when you mentioned all those people coming up behind him, I think that's what you're going to see when I look at the kind of way Zimmer likes to run his defense. He loves to show different looks to the offense and the quarterback, pre-snap and what have you, and confuse them. And so I think he's going to run a lot of players. And Mackenzie Alexander is going to get the lion's share of the snaps probably. Okay. But I think you'll see those different formations with Curse and, you know, playing, I don't know what Luke called it, but, you know, a hybrid of some sort, you know, safety coming up to play in the slot. And you got Holton Hill, you've got, you know, Iloka's going to probably get some more. I was
going to ask, do you think, or just not to interrupt you, but do you think that having a guy like Iloka helps them move Curse over? Because he can do a lot of things too.
I don't get down in the weeds too much with personnel changes and all that, because I just don't spend a lot of time on that. But I think you've got to. It's like I was saying, I think you're going to see all kinds of different looks, and that's exactly what you might see. Zendejo is still probably going to be out. He hasn't practiced either Wednesday or Thursday. And
what's wrong with him?
I'd have to look it up. But I think, it's a groin, as I recall.
Groin? Yeah, okay.
Which is tough to come back with. So I don't think we'll see him. They'll want to heal that up before he gets back. And so you'll see Iloka getting a lot of time. You'll see Kurse getting a lot of time, and Hill in there. But there's an article in the Star Tribune this morning on Mackenzie Alexander, how he's gotten better, and some of that comes when next man up. That he's got to play, but the powers that be start talking up the next man up, so it doesn't look so dire too. But I think he has played better this year.
He had a good game against the Cardinals for sure. I think it was the best game PFF for him ever. His grade. So that's encouraging.
Which is another thing, Joe. I mean, it stands to reason that he didn't get all that. He didn't. He got action his rookie year, but not much, and he made a lot of mistakes, and so it takes a while. So it's just another plaudit to Mike Hughes, who earned his way on to the field as a rookie in Zimmer's defense, which is amazing.
Yeah, it's really rough. He was playing well, and personally the work that goes into rehabbing from an ACL. I think you've torn yours 20, 25 times?
That's a little exaggeration, but yes. I did more work when I had my cartilage surgeries. I had 4 of them, but then when I tore my ACL and I didn't go through Adrian Peterson's workout regimen. I wish I would have, but no.
Well, that's how you set course records.
That's right. Of course.
Gotta love these inside jokes. I feel like I feel a lot better after last week with Mackenzie Alexander's how he was playing. I think the move from being an outside guy in college to the inside has been hard for him. And Hill's the same way. He's been used a lot to just spell Trey Waynes or Xavier Rhodes. So it will be interesting to see how they move forward. But there's injuries kind of piling up everywhere, which we'll get into. I wanted to get into the Friday's 5 Furious Facts, which if you're a beer drinker, might know who we're trying to get as a sponsor for that. But instead, I'll do the...
Yeah, they're kind of surly about the fact that we haven't
wink, wink. Really quickly, our show is brought to you by Revitalite, which is something that you definitely want to buy if you're going to the liquor store, because it's a rehydration solution is the best way to put it. So it replenishes your body, not just with their electrolytes, but other things that you lose either through working out or through watching a Vikings game and having a few beers. Check out our site, click on the banner, it'll show you where near you can purchase it. It's awesome. I don't drink anymore, but I drink a lot of Revitalite because it's just delicious and it actually works. So check them out. Friday's 5 Furious Facts.
Yay! Well, we do this each week, and I pull some figures that I think are going to be may have some say in what happens in the game on Sunday, and I have to give a nod to our partner Luke Braun, who on Wednesday's show I brought up I ranked the Jets defenses, I think 11th against the run, or maybe it was 14th or something, and he comes in, on PFF they have it ranked this way, and so just right over the top of me. So hopefully Luke's not listening, because I'm going to go all PFF on this.
Woo!
So
I'm excited, and PFF is a sponsor as well. Yes. So check out that banner because it's really nifty, actually.
Right. So I'm the first one. I went with their overall performance grade of the Vikings versus the Jets, and interestingly enough, the Vikings are ranked 14th in overall performance grade, and the Jets are 15th.
Wow.
They're 80.2 for the Vikings and 78.1 for the Jets, and these are, I don't know what their high point grade is, but
Yeah.
people that spend a lot of time PFF would know what those numbers mean right away. But the point to me is these teams are pretty close when you look at how they've performed thus far this year, and you have to take it with a grain of salt since the Vikings have played a bit of a tougher schedule than the Jets have.
Yeah.
Having played the Jets having played the Rams and the Eagles and the Packers and what have you. But so what are your thoughts on that one?
Do you know who the number 1 team is?
Let's see. I could look. I left it up here.
I've never looked at those grades before, so I find that really interesting. I think you nailed it with the, the Jets haven't had the hardest schedule, and I don't know if PFF takes that into account.
Good point. The highest grade is 93.7. It's the Rams, followed by the Patriots and the Bears of all things.
Oh man, and then all 3 teams that we're going to end up playing this season or have already played, which also goes back to the schedule thing.
Exactly. I say that's a very strong point because the Bears have played, a last place schedule, and their schedule's going to get tougher as they go. I think they have the Patriots this week, I believe.
Yeah, I feel like I assume the Vikings are on the upswing. The offense has played so well. The defense is getting there now too. I wouldn't be surprised if things go according to plan if they're in the top 10. But yeah, I do think that this, I was going to joke and say that this was trap game part 3 just because I know you hate the idea of a trap game. But, the Jets are a team to be reckoned with. And it just goes to show that, when you look at a schedule in, June or July, you don't really know what you're getting until really the week of that game. A lot of people were saying with Kirk Cousins, which we'll get into, why would you go to the Jets, or why would the Jets invest $90 million in one guy? You need 10 other guys, and they don't have that on offense. It'd just be a waste. That hasn't really panned out. At least they're beating, again, easy teams, but like you said, it's the NFL, so 3.5 point favorites. I think that the PFF reflects that. I'm a little iffy about the Bears score, especially after watching them against the Dolphins.
It must be just it probably doesn't take strength of schedule into effect. I don't know that, and if Luke was listening, he could call in and correct me, but.
Surprised he isn't texting me.
Look, it takes how they perform, I think, and if that's the case, the Bears have played well against the teams that they've played. Well, my second fast, furious facts for Friday for you is offensive grades, and the Vikings are come in as the 8th best team in offensive grade with 76.4, while the Jets are 25th at 68.0, which is kind of amazing since they've scored a heck of a lot of points.
I think they've had 49 points in the last 7 quarters. No, it was 69 points, I think. Let's see, I wrote it down.
That's amazing to think about that difference.
Yeah, 69 points in the last 7 quarters. That scares me a little bit. I think the Vikings score
had 48 the first game against the Lions.
Yeah.
In between, they haven't done so well, maybe.
And that irked me a little bit just because the secondary guys were, for the Jets after that game, were saying, well, we knew all the hand signals between Stafford and what's that guy's name? Bob Cooter.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, don't tell us. We could have used those. So maybe they had like a Giants 2001 hearing the headphones type situation. I do just want to add that I think that the Vikings are also on the upswing, even though they didn't light things up in the air last week. Balancing the run game is obviously important, and I think that's a big part of their grade not being higher than maybe people would expect, just because they've had that. So,
and that's what Zimmer likes to go to. So. Yeah, he wants balance. He wants to run the ball. He wants to have tough defense. He's that old school kind of coach. And
you need that on the road in New York, especially with these narratives that have been made out of whole cloth. I think we'll see more of it, and I think the grade will improve. Hopefully.
Well, I applaud Zimmer for that attitude because I'm a little older school person myself. I am thankful very much that the Vikings have John DeFilippo, a younger guy, in there who does like to throw the ball because I like to watch the passing game more than the running game, and B, you need it to survive in this NFL. There's just there's no more three plays in a clouded cuss. So I mean, come on, Mike. Anyway, defensively, that's the next furious fact is the defensive grades, and this one surprised me a little bit too, but it shouldn't because I think it's pretty reflective of what's going on. The Vikings are the 14th ranked defense at 73.8 for the grade, while the Jets are 11th at 76.2. So,
what were the Vikings again? 14th?
14th. So the Jets have a better defense. They've, according to these grades, they've played better against the teams that they've played against. And by next week, I'll have to define whether or not that I'll have to ask Luke if they take that into consideration.
And I think they have. Excuse me. I think they're down to 2 starters in their secondary.
That's true. Yeah.
So
is that I know they've had 11. Is that right? Is it 2? They only have 2. Oh my God.
I just read the article before we came on. So they're going to be missing Tremaine Johnson with a quad. He's missed the last 2 games. Buster Skrine, who's their slot guy, which will be huge, is out with a concussion from last week, and they don't think he'll be able to play. And then their safety, Marcus May, has a broken thumb and probably won't play either. You think about...
Claiborne's the only secondary guy that's going to be healthy for the game, right? Their best cornerback is Maurice Claiborne.
Yep. And then I wrote... and then Jamal Adams is the other guy that's healthy. So... And they talked to Claiborne. He said that they asked him if he felt that the Jets had to prove it. This was a prove it game to show that they're for real. He kind of dispelled that notion, probably because of the injuries. But you have to think of, especially that Buster Skrine being out in the slot, and you have Adam Thielen being basically unstoppable in the slot. That's actually one of my keys to the game. Foreshadowing. But that makes me feel a little bit better.
Yeah, and we can talk. Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Maurice Claiborne get a lot of steam for coming to the Vikings here when he was a rookie a few years back? And I heard Zimmer say the other day that he really liked him coming out of college. So I think there was a lot of steam behind that, and I think he went before the Vikings picked, and then they ended Trey Waynes. Is that the case, or?
Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. It might be somebody else. No, you're right. I remember it vividly because, and I've told the story way too many times, so I'll just cliff notes it. But I was a huge Trey Waynes guy because I loved Michigan State for obvious reasons. And there was someone else that basically everyone on Reddit wanted, and they got so mad at me for defending Trey Waynes that I got kicked out, and that's how Purple PTSD started. So I should remember a little bit better, but I think you're right about part of it.
He must have went earlier. I'm thinking back then the Jets were probably worse than the Vikings. Had a lower draft pick, but anyway. But I'll move on to the next 2, and they kind of go together, but they're separate. I think these will have an impact on the game. Strength versus strength, I get the passing offense of the Vikings versus the coverage defense of the Jets, and the Vikings are ranked 8th with an 81.7 grade in passing offense. And
wow.
It's obvious why. I mean, you've got Thielen and Diggs, and they've got mix in a little bit of what's his name, Kyle Rudolph, and Kirk Cousins has been, he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks all season.
I am really surprised that they're not higher.
Yeah,
I mean, you got the number 1 guy. You got, I think Diggs is 8th in terms of receptions with 40. Kirk Cousins is what? Almost 2,000 yards, 12 or 13 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I don't know how. Maybe unless they're saying that they rely on it too much, but I can't imagine 7 teams are better outside of the Rams. Maybe the Packers?
Saints, Rams, Chiefs, of course.
Yeah.
The Buccaneers with what's-his-face, Fitzmagic. The Patriots, the Packers, and the Bengals. Yeah, I would say those are all,
I don't know how good Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they're taking into account how good the Bucks were the first 2 weeks, but I don't think Jameis Winston's as good as anybody.
Only one of those teams grades out of the 80s, and that's the Saints at 92.2. The rest are in the 80s. The Saints or the Bengals are only marginally better at 82.6, and the Packers, they don't have a running game, so they're going to rely on their passing game. So I can see it. I don't think it's that much difference, but it goes up. And go ahead.
I have an article I've been working on, and I want to know how dumb you think it is. I wanted to compare Cousins' career thus far to Drew Brees and how he ended up leaving the Chargers, and I think he was 27 at the time, and I think Cousins is 29. Joined the Saints and has had all the success since, and then you have Cousins obviously coming here. He's got some weapons. He's starting to look like that kind of quarterback. Mm-hmm. Could end up on the same trajectory, but I thought, Breeze is breaking all these records. He's amazing, so I'm not gonna say that Cousins is going to do the same thing or that he's even, the same player. But I feel like it's a similar situation, and that he could be. I don't want to say a poor man's Drew Brees, but there was somebody in the Vikings management that was really close to Breeze, and I remember Sid Hartman writing about that and saying that the Vikings were a strong contender to get him, and then they were worried about his shoulder, so they didn't go after him.
That was Thielen when he was down in Miami. Thielen, okay. They looked at him very closely to take Breeze, but they said it was because of the shoulder they didn't. So they the Vikings were in on it early, but the last two people were the Saints and the Dolphins, and Spielman was the GM down there or whatever, personnel guy. I don't know what he was, but
okay.
So he's the guy that passed on Breeze.
And they seem similar physically, Yeah. I think Cousins is a little taller.
A little bit, but, not much.
I thought that was a cool comparison. Yeah.
I think it's a great idea for an article. You don't have much data yet on the post defection by Cousins, but if you can draw similarities there, it would be
interesting. Although Cousins has never been injured, so Breeze had the shoulder, but I think it's something to look at. But you just for you, we'll just put a stamp, a Big Ten logo.
That's basically the crux of the entire argument.
Anyway, the second half of my furious fact there is the coverage numbers for the Jets, which are ranked 12th at 76.4, and that's their strength on defense is coverage. So now we just talked a little bit earlier that they've got some people banged up in that, in their defense, and so it will be interesting to see if the Vikings can take advantage of it. I think they will spend a lot of time trying, because as we get into the next one, it's rushing offense of the Vikings for the rushing defense of the the rushing offense of the. I'll hold off because that's rushing offense of the Jets. But anyway, I think the Vikings will spend a lot of time concentrating on the passing game against the Jets.
We talked about this on one of our shows recently that playing the Saints the first week last year was the right time to play them. Playing was it the Eagles or it was somebody? It was the right time for the Vikings to play them.
Right.
I feel like that's really describes the Jets game just because of those injuries. If that's their defensive strength and they only have two of their guys, especially with this passing offense and especially with Thielen, it's the right time to play him, And I'll take, like you said, it's week to week. If people want to later say, well, we were, as a Jets fan, we weren't full strength, so, you guys didn't really, I don't care as long as they get the win, to be honest. So,
all right, well, let me move on to my last one. Before I do, I have to put out a caveat, Joe, that for all the listeners, that if I'm interpreting these grades incorrectly or am wrong, please let us know.
Yeah.
Anybody can call in or email in or whatever, except for Luke Braun. If it's from him, I don't want to hear it again. Anyway, so the final one is the Jets' rushing offense, which is their strength, against the Vikings' rushing defense. And this kind of falls in the Vikings' favor as well, because the Jets are rated 11th in rushing offense at 72.1 grade, which is pretty decent. I mean, they have Isaiah Crowell and Bilal Powell.
Yeah.
Talk about a jumble of words or letters to say.
Yeah, it's like getting a bad hand in Scrabble.
Exactly. And going against the Vikings rushing defense which is ranked 6th with an 84 rate. Yes, so they have been playing the rush running well. Unfortunately, I'm a little concerned with Linval Joseph has not practiced yet this week.
And Danielle Hunter was out yesterday, I heard.
He went out with a groin he showed up on the injury report with a groin injury, so that's getting tough. So
yikes. Today's going to be big.
Weatherly's going to play, and I guess Tayshawn Bauer has come off, so that's helpful. And they also have David Perry, which we signed. You might see some of him inside with Sheldon Richardson. And then there's that factor. They don't even need any of those guys. Just turn Sheldon Richardson loose on his vendetta. And
Rush one. It's a really interesting. I think today's going to be a big day for practice to see who plays and who didn't. I do think that Perry move was done specifically for obvious reasons. Everson Griffin is out. I did read though that the thinking there was that he could spell Joseph or fill in for him if he's hurt. I think that's where he got his sack against the Packers, was on the inside.
Yeah, he's an inside guy. He's an inside guy.
Yeah, so that's comforting. I do have a lot of faith. These soft tissue injuries just suck. I do think Bauer's good though. I would love to see him get more time to see what he could do. Me and my dad talk about the team a lot in this preseason. He said, "Man, this backup defensive line is better than most defensive lines in the league," and so I guess we'll find out about that. How do you feel? You mentioned that the Vendetta game. I saw maybe a new quote or something from a different perspective today, where he said time heals all wounds in regards to Sheldon Richardson, who was drafted by the Jets and then was traded, and he wasn't too happy about that. So they were asking him a little bit about that. He said, "I don't put stuff like that. It's about the team, not me, and it's any vendetta or anything like that. It's between me and." He just said between me. Which is frightening.
That's not a new quote. That was in my story from the other day, and he said that Wednesday when it was first questions they talked about him. He was saying, "I don't put anybody above the team. I put or myself. Okay, it's not about me. Don't put anybody above the team."
Yeah,
and I to a certain degree I believe it, but then he said, if there's a vendetta, it's just between me, and I think there is some truth to that in the fact that he was admitting that the reason he was gone were self-inflicted wounds. He had a couple off-field issues, and I don't think they were egregious, but they were enough that the Jets cut him loose and traded him while they could, and maybe when they could get the most out of him, and now he's here. So I've talked about him. With seeing him in camp, he's just got this look behind his eye. You just wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of this guy. So I think he might not have a vendetta that he's talking about to us, but I think he'll want to play well and want to show up well on Sunday. I think it could fact in the game.
And the new quote I mentioned was the time heals all wounds, but I think you're right. I think he's going to come out on fire. Especially the first two games of the season, I think he had some unrealistic 14 pressures each game, which was crazy.
You wonder about that. I just remember Zimmer saying after that, he goes, "Well, now we've seen it on tape," and it seemed, so he's going to expect that all the time. And to me, if you read behind that statement, it's that he doesn't show it every game, and we want to see that more often. So I think he showed up in games, but maybe not in practice every day. Who knows? I don't know that for sure. But when you hear a statement like that from Zimmer, you know that at some point he's not always given. But I think this will be a day when he is very excited to show up well in the New York media market, who probably ripped him left and right. And to have a good game is probably really important to him on Sunday.
Speaking of the media market, I did see a new article today from a competitor of the New York Post that basically slammed that article and said that, just for context for people that don't know, a writer for the New York Post basically created all this nonsense out of nothing, looking at the Vikings.com documentary where Cousins detailed his journey to get here. He took offense basically to the part where Cousins heard that the Jets were doing 3 years, $90 million. He looked at his fiance and she could not believe it, and he basically said, well, let's use this to get the Vikings price up, because his goal was to play for the Vikings. He made up his mind early on. I did not, and I'm being completely objective, having watched it, it's not like he did like a Mr. Burns excellent and then said, let's screw the Jets over. Like if he has any reason to do that. He did what any person would or should do, especially in the NFL, which is, monetize your talent. And he used leverage, which everybody does. We don't always see that. But this idea that he's like been rude to the Jets is nonsense. And I know like they're positioning it now as, I saw another headline this morning. Well, the Jets are better off with Darnold because he has a higher ceiling. And they made the right move, or they ended up better off, and even the article talking about Cousins said, it's this upstart team, and I do think that if they were like, if they won maybe one game or were 1-5, we wouldn't have heard that, but since they're, in the mix in the AFC East, and it's New York, we right. Hear it, but it was, that article kind of pissed me off, to be honest.
Well, it's the New York Post, and it's designed to inflame passions for the Jets, and it's a columnist who's looking, oh God, this will work. I can grind on this and get people reacting and click on my story and blah 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 blah. And Mark Cannizzaro is the guy who wrote it. And so it is kind of a hatchet job, not a hatchet job, but just something to get passions going, and
it worked.
You said it earlier. Yeah, well, you said it earlier. Cousins is doing exactly what he and his agent would do. You get offers you got people competing for you. And someone gives you a really nice number, and you don't think that place is exactly the right fit for you. Let's go see if we can get a place I think is a better fit to come up with their offer a little bit. And say, hey, this is out here. What do you think of that? Who wouldn't do that? Everybody would.
Yes.
Even this writer would, if given the opportunity to people bidding on his talents. It's the bottom line is the Vikings were a team built to win now, whereas the Jets weren't. So they're better off building with a young quarterback who you're going to take third overall in the draft. It makes no sense for them to even spend that kind of money on Cousins. Instead, they got all these draft picks and they got all this cap room that they can use to sign the players. It was a better move for them not to sign Cousins. No matter what this guy is talking about, and it's kind of embarrassing. You can tell that Cousins he's a nice guy. And it certainly wasn't his intent, what they were saying. And when you look at his face answering questions, just going, this was not designed to rip anybody else. This was, or embarrass anybody. This was only meant to show the journey that I went through to coming here.
Yep.
The Vikings made the video. The Vikings put it up on their site. Hello. Yeah, but it's I mean, haven't we all, Joe, just taken stories some other places?
Me? Never. I have no idea what you're talking about. Man, my seat is warm. Yeah. I found that article really early on, before everyone reacted to it, and I really wanted to write a response to it. But you're right, the New York Post, I mean, they're known for their like headlines that are always like salacious and all that, so you got to take that into account too. I had a question about something you said on the Purple Journal podcast, or maybe just when we were speaking about Dalvin Cook and saying that at this point he needs to play because he's missed all these games since they've drafted him. And that stuck in my mind because that was interesting. I hadn't heard that anywhere, and I was wondering. speaking of pulling things out of whole cloth, I could do an all caps headline: Dalvin Cook play or cut him.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, should our patients, like I said, soft tissue injuries are a huge pain in the ass. He was going to play last weekend and it flared up when he was stretching out. But at this point, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I agree. Like, I want to see him on the field in some regard, for multiple reasons.
That's interesting for you to say that, because I'm going the other way now. I mean, you rightfully brought that question up on our Wednesday agenda, and I thought, he was close. And Zimmer says if the guy's healthy, he's going to play. Granted, they have this regime and the regime before that always were very careful with their running backs, not to get them in. Play him too much and beat him up and get him injured. So, Luke had mentioned when we were talking about this, he said, yeah, he'll play unless there's a setback, and he's totally right. There was a setback yesterday. I mean, what's his face? Cook was full go, full participant on Wednesday. On Thursday, misses practice. And
yesterday?
Yeah, he missed practice.
I forgot about that.
Yes, and so he was out, and so that was obviously now a setback. I think he was doing some rehab work, and you said it yourself. I mean, they're tricky injuries. The hammy probably needs to heal, if anybody, completely before you can go out there and go nuts again. Because if partially tweaked, it's going to tweak again. So I don't expect to see him at all. I mean, I had him on my fantasy team, and I took him out.
Everybody on my team almost is on a bye. Which is probably because I have too many Seattle Seahawks, which explains why my team's in last place. But I have Leonard Fournette, and he's in a similar situation. There's reports that they're hopeful he'll play. I don't have anybody else, so I'm going to either play him, and if he shows up, he won't. Despite my terrible record, I don't want to cut anybody.
Would cut him.
He's might not play until week 10, though, so it's the same thing. They may be even more cautious going forward. We might not even see him next week, and then they'll see if they can get to the bye, and just get him healed up and keep him for the rest of this year, the late season run, which is really important. Which would be awesome.
I just thought he's missed so many games. It's important to get him back out there and get him in the thing, but not if he's going to be going in and out of the lineup with a hammy every week. That's just not good.
And you got to look at the pickup of Latavius Murray and say thank God.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's really an unsung hero, and it's easy to say now because he had his career high in rushing yards last week. Luke Brown wrote an article about that I read and got a nosebleed when I woke up. I retained none of it. But there was a lot of success, I think, on the line too. I just read an article. I was going to kind of fit in, how happy they've been with Brian O'Neill. He had his first start. He might never look back. He might be at right tackle, depending on what happens with Riley Reif. But you have, I think Boone is good. Is he on the level of, maybe a McKinnon? No, but I prefer him to Rock Thomas personally. I don't know how you feel about those two.
Well, that's a good point, which is another reason why the Vikings will probably err to the side of resting Cook, because they are deep at the position. Boone is every bit as good to fill in behind Murray and to spell him. And I prefer Boone just as his running style to Rock Thomas, but I think Rock Thomas might be a little bit better pass catcher, although he didn't display it in the Eagles game. But
DeFilippo said this week that Murray's really underrated in regards to his hands. He said he's a complete back. He's known for blocking, or protection, picking up blitzes and stuff too. So.
Well, that's good. I'm glad DeFilippo agrees with me.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I do think that you want him 100%, and if they can keep winning and then they bring him back, that just oof. I actually just I'm such a dork. I just got goosebumps.
That's why you have the site, Joe.
I love this team. Speaking of loving the team, it's really great. Just as a guy that we joke around, speaking of inside jokes, that I'm obsessed with the wide receiver position, which I don't think I'm alone, because the Climbing the Pocket Network, all those guys live in either Ohio or North Carolina, but they're Vikings fans because when they were little kids, the Vikings had Randy Moss and Chris Carter, and I feel like, yeah, I had that poster, man.
My kid had it in his room.
I wish I could find it again. I look for it all the time. I feel like we don't. Treadwell might not be Jake Reed, even though Jake Reed did have drop issues himself. But watching Thielen has been amazing. I love Diggs. I feel like the question I was going to ask you is kind of twofold. Do you think that and we've talked about this too, but that Thielen is either the best wide receiver in the NFL or in the category or in the conversation? And also, I just saw one of the guys, I think it was Claiborne, was talking about Thielen, and I mentioned something that the color commentator said about Thielen the last game, that he wasn't athletic. And Claiborne's quote was exactly basically saying that Thielen is amazing at running routes and that he'll trick you, but he's not like a 4.4 speed type guy. He's not super athletic. And he ran a 4.4 at the combine.
4.45, if that means anything.
Yeah, and it's like, ugh. And so I'm getting a little frustrated with this, like, juxtaposition between him being the best, but at the same time, he's not that athletic when he's, like, 6'2", can catch any pass thrown to him. He has the biggest catch radius of any wide receiver in the league. And, but you keep hearing that he's not like a good athlete, which is just so strange.
It is. Joe, you must do this just to get me going. And I'm gonna
I gotta throw one or two of them in there.
Thielen is where he is right now because he's a Zimmer guy. And why is he a Zimmer guy? Because he's not a guy who's going to go out there and promote himself and say, hey, look at me. Zimmer likes to fly under the radar. Thielen is perfect for him. Thielen is a great athlete. I wish people would stop saying he's getting all kinds of pub, but if this stuff has to stop. I mean, the guy started out on with the Vikings on their special teams. He ran a fake punt against the Packers, which was a huge first down. He then picked up a blocked punt or field goal or punt. I believe,
it was a punt,
and ran it in for a touchdown. So he scored his first NFL touchdown. Was on that play. And then, he just started moving on up. He, in high school, was a football player, I believe a basketball player in the winter, and a baseball player in the spring, plus golf. He had to, go more towards golf at the end of his career because their team won the state tournament in golf, and he was on that team. He was also playing in state tournaments on those other two sports. He's a phenomenal athlete. That's four that he was very good at. I'm sorry, you don't just you're a good athlete if you can vary your skills that way. You look at him on the field. He's not only a good athlete, he's smart. He knows where to find the holes in the zone, and get open. He knows the moves to make. You see him selling guys that are great athletes at corners all the time, and he's getting separation that are sometimes it's not, but sometimes it's getting great separation with a great move. It's just silly. And then the diving, the straight laying out, and the toe tapping.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you want from this guy to prove he's an athlete? Just because he doesn't look like a burner? You've just said he's 4.45. He's fast.
He's just as fast as Diggs, at least in a 40. I know Diggs has amazing top end speed.
But look at it. And why would that be? I guess I'm not going to go there.
I know. I know. And I feel like maybe that's part of it.
He's a perfect Minnesota athlete, Joe, because he's not out there, hey, look at me. He's just going to go out and let his stats say what he is. And if he isn't considered the best, I don't give a flying rip. He's certainly in the conversation, and he's helping his team win. And, come back to me, do we go ahead and let Antonio Brown or whoever have this moniker that they're the best in the league? I don't care.
Yeah. You're very right though about it being a very Minnesota thing. My dad always tells me a story about Minnesota was the number one state that bought Oldsmobiles because they thought the Scandinavians thought Buicks were too flashy. And I want to call Thielen the Oldsmobile of wide receivers. He could retire now and be a legend. I feel like.
If he does, I would cry though.
No, totally. I mean, it's just like I said.
and he just loves it.
It is amazing to be in the middle of, I feel like despite all the heartbreak, the reason that the Vikings have this enduring and endearing fan base is because they always end up with these once-in-a-generation type players. My entire life, you had Chris Carter, then Randy Moss, then you had Adrian Peterson, and now you have Diggs and Thielen. It's just really fun.
I got to send you this article. I wrote it this week for the Sports Post, which is another place I write for, and it was on Thielen, and it was basically I can't remember the title of it now, but it was the secrets of Thielen's success, and I talked about a little bit about his origin story, but I didn't get into the dental sales that he was almost going to do. So But at the end of it, it was a quote saying that I'm just trying to get better, and it's believable from him. And I just said, pinch yourself, Minnesotans. He just might get better. And it was about how Minnesotans don't. We didn't believe this right away. We were so happy that we just had a Minnesota guy on the team, and then all of a sudden he was making plays, and then we started winning more. So go and read that. I'll send it to you afterwards. It shows you how I feel about it.
I'll put it, if people are listening, I'll put it on the page. So if you found this on Pro PTSD or Vikings Territory, the link to the article will be there. Do you remember Ryan Hogue, the wide receiver? That was, I used to compare Thielen to him as like a great camp guy, local, small school that everyone was rooting for. Hogue always had great camps, but he never made the team. Yeah. And it's just amazing to see how far he's come. And you're right. Because I mentioned this maybe a week or this week or last. Every preseason, Thielen comes in and talks about what he needs to improve on, and that's scary for people, And I don't see his record stopping this week. I did take the over on Diggs getting, I think 7.5 catches and like 80 yards, because I do feel like maybe teams are going to try to scheme to stop Thielen. But when you don't have your personnel, how can you? And I think Cousins, despite his demeanor in the locker room, is going to be fired up this Sunday because of all this nonsense. And they very well could come out firing like they did in the second half against the Cardinals, and that would be great to see. Any final thoughts on that? I don't know. We were going to talk a little bit about Sam Darnold. I feel like don't know a ton about him. The Vikings are kind of going through the gamut of rookies this year.
Yeah, I saw him in the first game against Detroit just because it was I think a nationally televised game, and it was Detroit, so I watched it. And Detroit was just a hot mess that day, so I was kind of amazed at how successful Darnold was. I haven't followed him that much since, but I think he's got the size, the arm. He knows what he's doing, so he likes to get out of the pocket a little bit. I think that the Vikings are going to try to shut down the run early and get after him and try to mess with him like they did with the other rookie quarterbacks and successfully last week, but not so much against Josh Allen. But you
got to limit that. The only thing that scares me is the mobility. That's always seemed to be the Achilles for this Vikings team. I did want to too really quickly. I had my segment. We touched on a lot of these, so I'll just go through 3 ways that the Vikings can win. Come out firing was actually one of them. Play aggressive. Attempt to get a lead, and then build on last week and try to run the ball.
On the road, right there. That's a good key. Get a lead early and quiet the crowd. Yep. That's good.
Yeah, I love to see what they. They always write up the first drive. I'd love to see what they're going to do with DiFilippo getting more comfortable. Limit turnovers. I think the Jets' defense is tied for second most in the league for 10 interceptions.
Yep.
And they have the 6th lowest QBR, so their defense has been good. You talked about that, though. That's obviously a secondary thing mostly, and they're really banged up there. So just stop fumbling, please. This is from me to you, man. And the last one was just to run the ball with an exclamation point. I wrote that, full disclosure, forgetting that Dalvin Cook didn't practice yesterday. But, Murray is, again, unsung hero, I think. You obviously think so, too. he's a poor man's AP, I would say. He's
He looks
not
so much better this year that he's not injured with that foot or ankle. I mean, he had surgery before the season last year. He never was the same. He looks so much better this year. He's running with power. I mean, he moves some of those guys when he runs into them. And
that stiff arm reminded me of AP against the Browns that first Favre game, one of the best runs in NFL history.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be a good game. We actually last week did the first ever commentary. We have a bunch of the writers on. We take questions because we do a live chat as well. So if you join the live chat, you can ask us questions or follow along with us. It was actually really fun, even though the game was the first half was a little iffy. So you could tell we were nervous with our halftime predictions. We might do the full game this time. I know we're also working on a halftime show. So basically, just keep following us on social media, checking out our websites. We're doing a lot of stuff. Tyler Haig is moving his main podcast, Bleeding Purple, which has a huge following, onto the Purple Territory Network next Monday. So that'll be like our 7th show, and it'll be huge for us. So I wanted to thank everyone that's following us, that's giving us feedback, constructive criticism. That really does help us. This is a new venture. No one's really ever done this before. So, we're growing and we're learning, and it's been really fun, actually. So, yeah, just keep following us, following the sites, social media at Purple PTSD, at Vikings Territory. If you could make the live chat for the game, that would be awesome. But I keep an eye out for next week. We'll have some different schedule stuff. We might go on Monday. I think Joe mentioned you might be available on Monday. But we'll figure it out. But yeah, thanks again for listening. And this has been Morning Joe's